I'm frustrated by how Iowa handles the quarterback position. The good news for Iowa fans, quarterback's coach, offensive coordinator, go bye-bye. He's gone. Brian's gone. I don't have any lingering feelings of sadness. It's not any bittersweet moment. I think a lot of fans would say that. They're done. These last 2 games have been the epitome of ineptitude. They've played 3 top 25 teams this year, Mark, and they've combined for a score of 0-92. 92-0 in 3 games. I would say that their best 3 teams, without question, were Michigan, Tennessee, and Penn State. Is that fair? Those are the best 3 teams in the schedule. Wisconsin ended up being a good win on the road. Northwestern, good win. They look good in their bowl game. Iowa State, good win, although they lost in the bowl game. Those are good wins. The 3, you could argue, elite games were against those 3. And they got killed. They got squashed. They got mashed. All right. So, the offense is a wreck. There's no question about it. The offense is a wreck. And that hasn't changed. We've seen 3 years of it being a wreck.
We've gone back and forth with this so many times, and depending on what the latest performance was and how the rest of the league and their division was shaping up, we would either really go in on the offense for good reason, and then sometimes we would be highlighting how great the defense and the special teams were to keep this program in contention for a championship. But what you just stated, the statistic that you just threw out there, I threw out on social media yesterday. It's not easy to discover. It doesn't take hours of research. It slaps you right in the face. It's just, I have lost the vocabulary to describe. You just said a wreck, and I thought that might be the best way to describe it. I don't know that there's a team in college football that played those 3 teams that would not be able to score a point. So I guess the importance of it going forward is this Brian Ferentz's issue, and does it all go away with him? Or if they bring in a capable offensive coordinator, I'm not talking about one of the best in the sport, but a really good, capable offensive coordinator, if Kirk's approach is going to weigh that individual down and box them into a certain approach that is going to continue to produce what we're watching?
It's a good question, and I think it's fair to say, without question, Brian is a big part of the problem. You and I have had these discussions over the last couple of years. For those that say, "Oh, it's this problem, or it's this problem, or it's this problem," they're not recruiting well enough. They're not developing talent. They're not getting skilled players. They're not using the portal well enough. Those may all be true, but what's the biggest problem? And you can debate that if you want. I mean, some may say it's Kirk. I still think the biggest problem is Brian. And, how much leniency will Kirk give to the next OC? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I do think whoever it is, based on the candidates that have been named, or at least out there in the public, will give them a huge boost as it relates to the quarterback position. And people like Marco Lainez, really talented young guy, athletic, he needs to be developed. He needs someone that actually understands the passing game, not Tony Rasiopi. I know Tony is working with Marco. I've got nothing against Tony Rasiopi, but he needs someone here at Iowa. And John Budmeyer, if he's going to be the full-time assistant, be a full-time assistant. But Brian was the quote-unquote QB's coach, and we've seen nothing but poor production from everybody that he's developed, with the exception of being Nate Stanley, and I don't really know that you credit him for development, given the fact that he got here during the Greg Davis era. So big changes, especially at the quarterback position. That's my biggest point of concern, but also hope, because I think whoever they bring in is likely going to know a lot more about quarterback play than Brian Ferentz.
Okay, we've had a moron pop up a number of times in the chat. Wolverine Nation. Okay. There's a lot of garbage being spewed out here, and I'm being kind by using the term garbage. So Wolverine Nation has said the corn-fed morons in Iowa need to get rid of ass cheeks Ferentz. Okay. Kirk Ferentz is an exceptional coach. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. He should be. He's earned that. He runs an exceptional program. Maybe he's got a blind spot or two. We all do. Every professional does. He's done a great job. I think you made the comment to in your conversation in the show with Don Patterson yesterday that whether you consider Hayden Fry to be the ultimate, the gold standard of Iowa coaches or Kirk, that's a great debate. So he is arguably the greatest coach in the history of the program. And then love Mark for giving Corey and his dog shit program the time of
I
day.
think he's a
Mark is
little
doing God's work.
I think he's a little butthurt because I told him to get lost on Twitter because he's one of these guys that just comments. And I hate to block people because, I'm not trying to go out of my way to get rid of people. But eventually I just told, like, get lost. I don't want you on my feed. I don't want you responding. Like, you can respond a million times. I'm not going to respond to you. I don't care. I don't care about Michigan. I don't care about Harbaugh. I don't care about how you cheated and got to the championship game. I don't care. So just leave me alone. Go somewhere else. Don't make me block you. Find some self-respect and leave. Go somewhere else. Find a different thread. Marco. Can we talk about Marco? Can we talk about Marco
absolutely.
Lainez?
Because I know that you were adamant, and I did catch 10 or 15 minutes of the post game yesterday, if not more. You were adamant about him being inserted into the game, into the lineup before it was out of hand and he was placed in a bad situation, a no-win situation.
And Mark, I've been adamant about his upside since he signed, since he committed. I went back just for the sake of this discussion. What happened yesterday, last night, I went back to my first interview with Marco and reflected on what struck me about him. And I'm going to probably try to share part of that on Twitter or YouTube this week because I think people would benefit from going back and listening to him, even as a young guy, probably a 17-year-old in high school. His maturity, he's got a really good head on his shoulders, and everything about him off the field, everything about how he interacts with people and with the media and on every level that I have been exposed to, he is exactly what you want in a leader. And I know that's been said about other people. I'm not going to name other quarterbacks that are at Iowa, but he exudes that. And, the one thing I've said since he committed to Iowa is, and we can go back and watch the video, Mark, but he made the comment when he first committed. I talked to him before the interview, and then we talked about it on the interview. I had said in my breakdown, this guy kind of reminds me of Brad Banks. Just the way he runs, like they would not seen a guy that is this mobile and this athletic since Brad Banks at quarterback. And then what's crazy about this, and granted is, 5-6 runs. He comes in early yesterday in the fourth quarter, and there were people on Twitter, like, significant media people in the Iowa beat, this guy looks like Brad Banks. And I'm like, hello, McFly, like, seriously. So, I'm not saying he's the next Brad Banks, but I'm saying he did model his game after him, which is funny because Marco Lainez wasn't even around. He wasn't a twinkle in his mother's eye when Brad Banks was playing in 2002, but he has said that before. He has got, I believe, I go back to the interview. I believe it's either an uncle or a grandfather that grew up an Iowa fan. And then Marco started watching Iowa and, really took to Brad Banks, watching his highlight film, and just basically said one summer, he said, I want to model my game after this kid. I love how he can extend plays and run. I want to be a dual threat quarterback. And so even though he was listed as a recruit, as a pro-style quarterback, he's agile. Like, he was making guys miss yesterday. And I don't know when you turned the game off and went to a different one, Mark, but I'm assuming, did you see his first couple of drives?
I did.
Yeah. Critical downs, long yardage situations, and some nifty moves to get out of pressure situations. Didn't have much time, similar to what we've seen from Deacon and Spencer over recent time. So the line is still an issue, but the difference is here's a guy who can run and make guys miss and change direction and who's not afraid to take a hit. I mean, I was impressed. I mean, we're talking 3rd and 12 and, 4th and 15 he converted. He's got to work on the arm, but I mean, this was his first ever action. He's a true freshman, did not enroll early. He got here in the summertime. And, frankly, 2 of 7 for 4 yards. He didn't do anything through the year. But again, it was his first ever action. They came in the game down 28-0 against a defense that was just teeing off on him. and sending 5+ basically every time because they were in obvious passing situations every time. Iowa didn't put a back there with Marco. They basically went naked, or excuse me, they basically went empty almost every time with him out of the shotgun. So, there's just a lot of positive things to take away from what we saw from Marco Lainez yesterday. And, how will Iowa utilize him? You hope that whoever the next OC is has a big role in that, because I don't think many people, I know I don't, have a whole lot of confidence in Kirk Ferentz to evaluate quarterback play or certainly develop it.
I would like to go back, and I will at some point, although I promised myself this concerning all these bowl games, to go back and pick out particular teams and players that I think need some review, and he would be one of them. And it's only 7 passes, but I would like to go back because I don't recall watching the 7 passes. Unfortunately for my Iowa viewership of the 2 games, so I was really locked on Wisconsin LSU, Iowa Tennessee. The Wisconsin LSU game started an hour earlier. Fortunately or unfortunately, it would have been nice if the Iowa Tennessee would have been the great game and the Wisconsin LSU game would have been the lousy game, because by the time the Wisconsin LSU game was over, there was only an hour left approximately in the Tennessee Iowa game, and it was obviously over. So I had both games on at the same time, but that Wisconsin LSU game was a heck of a ball game. So I did see the scrambles, and I did note, even before I heard you say it on the post game, yeah, this is not just a CJ Beathard who is a good enough athlete, can run pretty fast from point A to point B, but he's got some wiggle. He can slither through some creases and dodge some guys and create. And it's just something we haven't seen.
You know what, Mark, what Don said during the post-game show, and he was being serious. This is former offensive coordinator. He said, frankly, Marco could probably fill in as an emergency running back. I mean, he's obviously a little tall. I think he's 6'2" or whatever, but that's how quick with his feet he was, and good burst. I mean, again, and what I liked about watching Marco, and I actually went back. This is crazy that I did this after a 5-hour post-game show, but Don and I stayed on together, and we actually went back. We should have been recording all this. We went back and went through the film of Marco during that stretch and broke down every play just between the two of us. And, again, there was a bunch of breakdowns up front, and he's going to learn, he's going to be responsible for changing protections, different times. I think he probably, was not ready to do that. And that was exposed a bit on Saturday as well, or on Monday. But what I liked about it too is seeing his internal clock go off. I mean, a couple of those runs, it was like, okay, 1, 2, nope, go. And he went the right direction at the right time. And it's just, there's a knack for that. I mean, it's just being aware. I think his pocket awareness was pretty evident even in a small sample. And they have just not had a guy who could be mobile. And I think seeing him, what he did even during that short period of time on the ground, I think is even more of an indictment on the coaching staff for not having a package ready for him, not just in this game, but in other games, with all the issues they've had at quarterback. Like, it'd be one thing if he was just another immobile pocket passer, and the coaches are like, well, he's kind of the same. He just doesn't know the playbook as well. But he's not. He proved that yesterday, that he can run like the wind. I mean, the dude is quick. He's fast. He's athletic. And it's not like this is the first time they've seen this. Like, this is the first time the average fan has seen it. But I mentioned on the show, I had a conversation with an Iowa player during the season, who was a defensive starter all year, who made the comment to me that, man, Marco makes us run like crazy. He's like, we have not had a guy like this back at quarterback. That was early in the year. And he was talking about fall camp. So, I just, they need somebody who can evaluate these guys better. And hey, what's Marco going to do? Especially if Cade's not going to play this spring. Cade's out. So, it's Deacon and Marco, unless they go get somebody else. Labus is gone. They'll get James Rezar in. I don't think Rezar is enrolling early. I don't think. I've not had conversation with James, but you're going to have two guys plus maybe Tommy Paholski. I think he's got another year left as a walk-on. One thing Don Patterson said that he'd like to see is Marco be the number one guy in the spring. He thinks that Marco has shown enough, even in that short period of time, and Deacon has failed to show enough over a long stretch of time, that Marco should be able to go into the spring knowing he's taken first-team reps because of his ceiling, because of his upside. And I absolutely agree with that. To me, that would be abundantly, extremely smart and wise. Like, let him go against the ones and understand these things throughout spring. And he's a hard worker. I mean, it was commented, I think it was yesterday, Chad Leitstick of the Des Moines Register tweeted out, I think it was Jay Higgins or Nick Jackson, one of the two linebackers, made that comment about how he's always working. He's always working on the field afterwards. And I can just tell you, again, Marco comes from a great family. His grandma is very involved in our show. She might be listening right now, Mark. I know she comments quite a bit on the post-game shows, and that's always cool to see. He's just a good kid and a guy you're going to root for, and he's just got so much that Iowa has not had back there in so long. I just hope that his development can be put into hyperspeed, especially with the injury to Cade and the problems they've had with Deacon.
So I posted a poll on Twitter early in the ball game and was about to do the same thing on our YouTube page here, except I remember doing this a couple weeks ago and I went back and looked, and we've got about 400 votes on YouTube, and we had, 175 here, so close to 600 votes, and roughly 80%, I think it's 78% here. It was over 80% on the YouTube channel. About 75 to 80% of what I would think are mostly Iowa fans chiming in, saying that there should be a pursuit of a transfer quarterback. Well, it's certainly not just as easy as doing that. There has to be interest on both sides. There has to be scholarship review to see what's available. So, Corey, you have certainly, responded to anytime I've brought this up recently. So where do you think we stand on that, and what would need to be done?
I'm not against it. I don't think it's a bad idea. People know in the past I've been avid about them needing to go to the portal at quarterback. So I'm not against the idea as a whole. My biggest concern is I don't know that there are going to be scholarships available. Right now they don't have scholarships. So unless guys leave, I don't think at this point there's anybody that could come back. One of these COVID guys that has an extra year left. I don't think there's any of those guys that could come back that you would say, we want you to move along because we need to get a, backup or a third string quarterback. I think if you can get Sebastian Castro back, you take him. If you can get Quinn Schulte back, you take him. And obviously you take Cooper DeJean back, you take Nick Jackson back. So there's just not spots. I mean, if they have a bunch of guys leaving the portal, which I don't anticipate happening in the coming days, then yeah, entertain it. I think the future at quarterback is Marco Lainez and potentially James Rezar, and Rezar's not even here yet, but I think the future is Marco. And do they need to develop depth behind him? Absolutely. Is there concern with Cade McNamara's injury history? Absolutely. If Deacon leaves, they do need to go to quarterback and get a guy. But I mean, I don't know. Is this weird for me? I know people rip on Deacon Hill, but he played 9 games. If he's the third string quarterback next year, Mark, isn't that good enough? Is that a bad attitude to have? Can you really expect to have much better as a third stringer than a guy who started 9 games and won a bunch with your team?
Not as a third stringer, but if Marco Lainez doesn't develop and turn out to be the type player that you believe and others do,